Welcome to me, where suspenseful, thrilling, and mysterious stories will draw you into a world where the lines between reality and fantasy seem to blur. When the night falls, when all the sounds gradually quiet down, leaving only your own heartbeat and breathing, that's when these stories begin. Tensions, unsolved mysteries, moments that will make you hold your breath in fear or curiosity, all are waiting for you ahead. Find a comfortable seat, dim the lights, and let this sound guide you on a journey that is not for the faint of heart. I want each of you to leave a comment sharing where you are in the world. And if you are enjoying the episodes, don't forget to give a like and subscribe to the channel now. Relax. Are you ready? If so, join me in the first story right now. Unexpected turbulence. I catch myself staring into the bright blue space of nothingness as I instinctively prepare another cup of tea. Balancing myself with a wide stance, the tea swoops up around the cup, teasing a spill, as I manage to place it down for the woman in 12D. Her legs stretch out in front of her as she makes the most of the emergency exit row. I move down the next few rows, filling plastic cups with water and stale coffee. My mind is once again invaded with their final words to me. You're just asking for it, now being another glorified air waitress. What are you doing tonight, Soph? Krista asks, rearranging her white blouse and smoothing down her skirt as I start packing down the drinks cart. Just the usual, I guess. Wow, look at you spicing things up, she mocks, adjusting the pink scarf around her neck with perfectly manicured hands. The usual means I will be performing the same overnight trip routine of gym, jog around the city, order in cheap hotel food, and read a book. I once defied my better judgment and went out with Krista, but ended up having a panic attack in the bathroom. One of the guys at the bar had slipped an arm around my waist, and the touch of a stranger set off every warning sign in my body. I opted to get the next round of margaritas after pulling myself together, and my head didn't hit the hotel pillow until 3 a.m. before my alarm woke me up an hour later. The sunlight at this altitude is unforgiving on hungover eyes. So who are you planning on staying up with all night? I tease. Okay, so you remember how I told you about Matt? I hardly remember any of her friends' names, but I nod anyway. So he's in town and has invited over a couple of his friends from work. We are going to start at Gin Palace. You remember that cute place, right? Hidden door in the alleyway, a few lanes down from the hotel, bookcases on the wall, house music, and those huge wine glasses I like, but with all different types of fancy gin and tonics. With my back to her, as I stow away the trolley, I realize she's waiting for my confirmation. Oh yeah, I remember. Nice place. Unbothered by my obvious lack of interest, she continues. Anyway, we are starting there, and then we're trying a new spot nearby. Apparently, one of his friends knows a club that is all completely glow in the dark, and she's cut off by the sound of the seatbelt light turning on as the captain announces we are likely to experience turbulence. Our cabin manager signals us to make our way down the aisle to ensure everyone follows the instructions, stopping to help a mother of 2 buckle up her sticky-looking toddlers. I think about Krista and how she is so open to new experiences and people. I can already imagine how her night is going to go. She will greet her friends with a big smile, and they'll cheers to having a fun night ahead. They'll share laughs, gossip, travel experiences, and talk like they've known each other for years. She has that effect on people, myself included. A commotion seems to be happening down the back of the plane, but it doesn't sound unusual. It's probably another disgruntled passenger complaining about being restrained by the seatbelt sign. Sounds like another safety rebellion happening. I joke quietly as I meet Krista in the center of the cabin. Actually, it's some fancy businessman with an accent complaining he was assigned the wrong seat. She rolls her eyes. I think he's European, but not the sexy, swoony kind. My stomach drops from the mention of an accented businessman. I swallow the wave of anxiety and force a sarcastic smile. If only more swoony European tourists came here for holidays, hey? Well, I wouldn't be hanging out with Matt and his friends tonight. I'll tell you that. She quips. We're about 30 minutes from touchdown and about to prepare the cabin for landing. It has been a relatively easy flight. Everyone in my section seems content, and the disgruntled man appears to have quietened down. Our cabin manager approaches Krista and I. She asks us to continue scanning the rows further down while she checks in with the captain. The turbulence is almost unnoticeable as I walk toward the back of the plane, but I sense a few nervous flyers and reassure them it's okay. We're not far from our destination. Then I see him sitting in the aisle seat, second row from the back. Cold gray eyes stare right through me. His mouth curls into a tight, malicious grin. A sudden drop of the aircraft challenges my balance, and I grab onto the nearest headrest to steady myself. Apologizing to no one in particular, I turn around in disbelief. Looking over my shoulder, I check if it's just a cruel trick of my subconscious. The seat is empty. Terror begins to smother my body, and I feel my hands tremble. His face has haunted me before. I've seen him in train stations, in busy restaurants, and on crowded flights like today. I'm almost used to his memory penetrating my reality. I remind myself again that it won't be real, and my mind is playing tricks. A few confused faces bring me back, and I straighten up before retreating to the front of the plane. Pulling the curtain across behind me, I start to feel my throat close up. It's not real. He's not here. I was just imagining it. My hand is gripping my chest, as if to stop my heart from bursting out of me. The lavatory door is opened, then locked on the other side of the thin material, separating the passengers, oblivious to my silent distress. Calming my breaths to a steadier rhythm, I squeeze my elbows onto the small bench space in front of me and let my head fall into my hands. I sense I am no longer alone. The uniform suits you. Now I'm hearing things. My insides turn, and I feel vomit fighting its way up. You don't have to be shy. I know it's been a while. His words are thick with Syra, and an accent I haven't heard in over a year. My nose twitches as his cologne inches closer, infiltrating my airways with unbearable familiarity. Definitely real. I've missed you, he says casually, as if we are two old friends. I desperately will for Krista or another attendant to interrupt the reunion, but I remain compromised. He's dangerous. I know this. A plane full of bystanders and a small crew of staff. What is he willing to risk? Before I am able to answer my own thoughts, I feel a cool touch to my lower back, and I stiffen. The hairs on my neck snap out like razor blades, and my blood turns to ice. Why won't you look at me, my dear? As his hand slides further up my back, I'm screaming for help, but no sound is leaving my mouth. I'm launching my knee into his ribs, but my legs are stuck in place. I'm reaching for the intercom, but my hands are locked together on my chest. A jolt knocks us both off our balance, and I'm able to swing out of his touch, only to find us face to face. He's shorter than I remember. Silver flecks scatter the sides of his thinning hair. He's even uglier than I remember. Sir, you can't be back here. Krista drifts past the curtain and pauses in between us. Get back to your seat now, please. Of course, my dear. Pausing to smirk before he exits. Are you okay? You look like you've just seen a dead body. Krista's face is filled with concern. I bite my tongue before responding with, I wish I had, and let her know I'm fine, just a little shaken from the bumpy ride. Oh, really? I can hardly feel a thing. She moves over to the CID's system and sets the lavatory lights to red. We'll be descending soon. I straighten up my blouse and pat under my eyes to make sure any signs of horror are blurred into my smooth, professional mask. So did Mr. Fancy Pants think he'd find his seat up here? What? I can hardly hear her over the ringing in my eardrums. The European guy with the accent. Was he pestering you about his seat? Oh, I force an eye roll. He just came too far, up looking for the bathroom. Well, you'd think he's a regular flyer with that attitude. Wouldn't he know where the lavatories are on these planes by now? I shrug and move past her, pretending to be busy conducting final checks on the food and beverage lockers. Krista announces the instructions for our descent across the cabin intercom, then turns to me. I'm just going to do a final rubbish collection and seat check. You want to just wait here? You look a little pale. Yeah, if you don't mind. Thanks. I move to open up the jump seat and begin to strap myself in. Damn, I mutter. I forgot to pull back the curtain. My hands are still shaky from the monster behind it. I begin to release the seat belt and stand up, taking a deep breath in before I reach up for a handful of fabric. But a hand grabs mine first. My weight is suddenly whipped out from underneath me, and I'm falling. A wicked crack erupts from behind my ears. I can feel something warm and wet trickle down my back. You thought you could run away, and I would forget about you? He's hovering over me. Did anyone hear me fall? Bringing his slimy fingers to my face. He strokes my cheek. Paralyzed. I'm trying to run in a bad dream, but my legs won't move faster than a walk. I'm being chased, but my body has no sense of urgency. My mind is fighting to control a faulty vessel. His hand on my thigh makes me feel 18. Oh my God! I hear someone shriek. She fell. I was just checking on her. Sophie, are you okay? What happened? Krista bends down next to him, and I struggle to focus on which one of her swirling faces is real. I want to tell her to call for an emergency, but I can't seem to gather the words. She's an old friend. I can keep an eye on her if you get a first aid kit, he says, maintaining his cool composure next to me. Looking directly at him, she says, "Sir, you need to leave right now." Before she can say more, he thrusts his hand around her throat, and she is backed against the jump seat I was sitting on just a minute before. Awful screeches escape from her mouth as the veins grow by her temples. Her eyes search desperately. Watching my friend struggle for her life suddenly releases all the tightly wound ropes, holding me anchored to the floor. My hand reaches for the nearest cupboard, and a coffee pot extends from my arm and cracks down on his skull. I hit him again and again and again. "Soph," she croaks. "Sophie," Krista pleads, struggling to pull herself up from the ground. He is silent. Snapping back to my sense of self, I realize what I've done. The coffee pot drops from my hand, and a few wet drops slide off my face with it. "We need a doctor. Is anyone a doctor?" I yell, and hear the gasps echo down the aircraft. I was fresh out of high school and approaching my move-out date, assigned by my parents when I started working. It was said to be the best restaurant in town. We had regular guests from all over the world who stayed in the hotel above. I didn't notice it at first, how I was always rostered on the section of mostly dinner for ones. I received generous tips and learned about the different places they were all from. I enjoyed being praised for my efforts and attentiveness during the meal. The mostly male and outspoken staff generally left me alone, which suited me just fine. Though occasionally they'd comment on my appearance, telling me I needed more makeup if I had tired eyes or to put on a smile when I was clearing tables. The manager would joke about my tight ass and even grabbed it once to check the merchandise in front of the kitchen crew. Mr. Ackerman would arrive every night at 5 p.m. and order a glass of Syrah when he was in town. He'd sink into the couch at the bar and chat to the staff about life in Europe and his work in the oil business. I caught his eyes scanning my movements a few times, but we didn't speak until I was placing the napkin at his table and asking, "The usual again, sir?" Make sure you take good care of him. I was frequently reminded by my manager, Colin, at the mandatory Christmas work party. We had dinner at a local pub, and Colin insisted we joined him for drinks after. Once a girl refused these nights out drinking, and she shortly had her hours cut and tips reduced until she had no choice but to quit. At the bar, we ran into some of our regulars. Mr. Ackerman seemed pleased to see us and eyed my black dress thoroughly before delivering a sharp wink. You should go chat with him. Keep up the good service, you know. My manager instructed with a pat on the ass, a glass of wine in hand. Courtesy of the man next to me, I sat there, struggling to answer the questions over the blasting music. I noticed how misplaced Mr. Ackerman was in his business casual attire, surrounded by partying patrons, 10 or 20 years his junior. Sorry, I didn't hear you. I leaned into his side ever so slightly, struggling to keep any distance between us. His hand slid around my thigh in response. I'll miss seeing you when I go back home. I'm sure you'll be fine. There were flowers in my locker the following week, and a note saying he looked forward to seeing me again. I tried talking to Colin about how it made me uncomfortable and thought it was unprofessional. Sophie, this is professional. You're making connections and bringing in regular money. Keep up the excellent work. He checked in a month later and greeted me with 3 kisses on the cheek during a busy service. I wanted to run. I wanted to wash his touch off in a scorching shower. Instead, I smiled and continued serving overpriced glasses of champagne. Then came dinner. Colin called me before my shift, asking me to wear the same black dress from the Christmas party. It's a formal kind of occasion tonight. We need to be on an extra level. Too afraid to disobey, I reluctantly arrived with black kitten heels to match, only to find I was to be served that night instead of serving. Promised my pay as usual, plus a tip from the foreign businessman, I followed orders. We sat at the candlelit table and discussed his travels and work in the private dining room. I actively avoided any conversation directed back to me. A package with a silver bow was placed between us when the plates were cleared. For you, my dear. I carefully unwrapped it to find an expensive-looking perfume. Only the best for my favorite girl. I don't know what to say. Forcing a smile, which ached my entire face. Say nothing, he whispered, pulling my hand toward him before placing his lips on my skin. I resisted every urge to whip it away and smack his jaw, but I felt another pair of eyes on me. I glanced over to the room door to find my manager peering in, nodding in approval. Everyone knew. They all played a part in it. They helped print letters, deliver flowers, and even gave him my phone number. I was a pawn in their game. Mr. Ackerman must have offered more money than I could have imagined to the entire hotel staff. What other motive did they have? Or was it just a funny joke to them? What followed in the months after will stay with me for the rest of my life. I eventually cracked the morning after being requested to join Mr. Ackerman in his room for the night. I burst through the lobby and headed straight to the manager's office. I'd saved enough of my generous tips to book a flight to the other side of the world with an approved visa and an interview with an airline. I could finally escape. Colin laughed in disbelief of my resignation and career change. You're just asking for it, now being another glorified air waitress. I dropped my apron on his desk and left without another word, going over the interaction in my head, making sure I didn't let it slip where the airline was based. The thud of the wheels touching down sends excruciating pain up my scalp as I continue applying pressure to my wound. Krista is sitting opposite me with her face slowly returning to color, squeezing my hand. The emergency services are waiting at the gate, and I brace myself for the chaos about to erupt when we open the doors. I don't know what is going to happen. All I know is that my chest feels lighter, and I can breathe again. Master of Puppets. Io sono il padrone, e tu sei il burattino. I am the master, and you are the puppet. Working in an antique store was hardly where Aislinn saw herself 5 years ago. But beggars couldn't be choosers in this economy. Her dreams of becoming someone had been crushed by the reality of life and the collapse of her support system after college, and she depended on this job to make ends meet. Still, something was charming about the Raven's wares, even if she did encounter some characters from time to time. Her cousin often asked her if she had ever felt spirits or weird energy working around the real skulls, the old Victorian dolls, or the taxidermy of the raven that gave the store its name. Like everyone in the town, Aislinn had heard horror stories about the objects sold from this place. A man bought a doll for his daughter, and they all vanished without a trace a week later. A woman bought a pretty ring and died in a freak accident with the ring on her finger. Someone bought an old statue and fell down their stairs. The truth was, Aislinn didn't believe in those sorts of things. Ghosts, ghouls, or energies. Sure, the place was creepy if you worked late alone on long winter nights, but it paid the bills. Those horror stories were coincidences. Plenty of people had purchased items from the Raven's wrath without an issue. Her cousin believed in that side of things so strongly. People whispered about her behind their hands. If Aislinn started believing, what would they say about their family? It was bad enough she worked here. The customers you never heard about were outsiders. A tiny voice in her head would whisper when she had this argument with herself. You've never followed up to check on what happened afterwards. She looked up from her phone when Eli barged their way back through the piles of antique junk piled around the place. A guy dropped off this painting today. I'm telling you, it's weird. Aislinn knew that everything here was weird, in one form or another. She once had someone try to offer a jar of real human teeth. That had been on her second day, and regrettably, it had not been her last strange experience. They jerked their thumb over their shoulder. "It's out the back, by the rocking horse. I need you to label it up before you leave tonight." Did he give any details? Nah, I'm surprised you didn't see him. Dark-haired guy, glasses, had some sort of accent. She vaguely recalled someone coming in of that description when she'd been restocking some old hardbacks and had directed him towards Eli at the back of the store. She wouldn't have thought of him again, save for the odd look in his dark eyes. "I sent him to the back to see you. He had this look in his eyes, like he'd seen things, you know? I offered him a fair price, but he didn't even want the money. He just said to take it." "He didn't want money?" Aislinn repeated slowly. "That's a bit weird, don't you think? Maybe it came with bad memories or something." Eli shrugged. "Just make sure to get it cataloged to go out on display. I've got to head off. I'll see you tomorrow." The afternoon was quickly fading, the air becoming colder and far less welcoming inside. The eyes of the raven on the desk seemed to watch her every move, and the gentle ticking of the antique clocks suddenly felt ominous. Even the shadows of the shelves seemed to be lengthening, reaching out in her direction. Aislinn looked up from her book and paused. The store had fallen eerily silent. She felt her heartbeat increase as the hair at the back of her neck stood up. Hello? Why was she calling out? There was no one there. No one had entered the shop. The bell above the door had been silent for hours. A faint whisper seemed to be coming from the distance. Someone must have left the radio on in the storage room. She walked to the back of the store, trying to ignore the feeling that the eyes of the dolls were watching her. It wasn't like her to be this paranoid. She pushed the door open wide and reached in to grab the portable radio the manager insisted on keeping around. Her hand found the handle and lifted it out. It was switched off. "Okay," she muttered, feeling a cold trickle of sweat run down her back. She set the radio down on an empty stool and worked away around the mountains of antiques to find the latest addition to the collection. Aislinn pulled the sheet off slowly and recoiled. The painting was of a hanging puppet, clearly based on the original Pinocchio story. It's dressed in traditional clothes against a gruesome backdrop of bones and the occasional skull. The entire thing was bordered by a swirling wine-red, blood red. A shudder ran down her spine as she took in all the gruesome details. The glass on the front was cracked, but that was hardly anything they couldn't fix. There was something odd about the break, something she couldn't quite put her finger on. She turned the painting over to check the back of the frame and noticed a faded name on the back, too illegible to read, and an unmistakable bloody handprint. What the hell? The painting clattered to the floor as she reeled back, banging into a cabinet and screaming as the puppet hanging there swung into her face. Its painted smile seemed twisted into a cruel leer as she swatted it away, clutching at her chest. She took some calming breaths. She picked the painting up from the floor with shaking hands and turned it over, aware of her heart racing in her chest. There's no bloody handprint, only the faded marks of a name. You're going mad, she muttered to herself. You need to get out more. She carried the painting to the desk and started cataloging it, intrigued by the lack of an artist's mark. Even a quick Google search yielded no results, and after a few minutes, she brought it back to sit at the back by the dolls and puppets. She took a moment longer to stare at it and turned back to the front. There was a rocking horse in the middle of the aisle. No, that wasn't possible. She hadn't moved anything. Hello? She called out nervously. This isn't funny now. Come out. When no one answered, she tried to focus. Maybe it had been there before, and she had simply walked past it, not noticing. Eli had said the painting was out the back by the rocking horse. For a moment, her cousin's voice echoed in her ear, though she tried to deny it. This was not the first time something like this had happened on her shift. Eli had laughed it off with her at the time, but she hadn't seen a bloody handprint last time. Eli had moved the horse. That's all there was to it. Aishlin walked back to the front of the store and stared out at the street, across at the ordinary sight of the small local shop and the dress shop beside it. Maybe she needed a holiday. The radio started playing a Cure song. Had she turned it on? When had she brought it to the front? Suddenly, the dark shop seemed alien to her. No, now she was being stupid. She didn't believe in any of that stuff. A sudden tiredness overcame her as she sat back in her chair and started to doze, watching the cuckoo bird on the antique clock swing backwards and forwards, swinging, swinging. She could hear the distant creaking sound of a rope and sobbing cries, growing louder and louder. Oh, how painful! How painful! Why wasn't I good? Something was hovering in the corner of her vision. Every instinct in her body screamed at her not to turn and look, to run away from that shadow. She turned her head and saw the puppet from the painting. It raised its head and leered at her. Puppets have no soul, but they do a lot of harm. Suddenly, she was the one battling with the rope as the puppet laughed and screeched over and over. I want to be real. I want to be real. I want to be real. Aishlin leapt up from her sleep, feeling the phantom rope around her throat. Every item in the shop was facing her. They seemed to be looming towards her, skulls echoing the cries of the horrific voice as it cried out over and over. Whatever sick joke this was, she wasn't playing anymore. She ran to the door and tried to haul it open. It was locked. The room seemed to darken, and the sound of the puppet's voice, distant at first, became unmistakable, growing clearer with each passing second. Its whispers now unmistakably directed at her. Oh, che male, che mal. She picked up a metal poker and walked to where the painting sat. The voice was louder now. its desperate cries in both English and Italian piercing her ears. "What the hell are you?" The voices paused. "You should let me out. You're just like me. You're a puppet too." Aislinn lifted the metal poker above her head. "What are you?" "You should let me out, Aislinn." She tried to move away, but her back smacked into a large cabinet. "What the hell are you?" My last puppet didn't obey. He brought me here. Un burattino che non obbedisce finisce sempre male. A puppet who does not obey always ends badly. You should let me out. I've always been here, waiting for someone to let me out. She realized then what was wrong with the glass. Something was trying to break free from the inside. Her own reflection in the glass warped into a puppet's face, and she felt the weight of something choking her. No, she was not a puppet. She was a human. This wasn't real. I am the master of puppets. Puppets have no soul, but they do a lot of harm. I tried to take his soul, but he broke free. You will let me out. You are my puppet now. You saw it in the glass. You're like me. Aislinn watched in horror as the cracks in the glass grew wider. It will end badly for you if you do not obey. She lifted the poker to swing it, and the hands of the puppets on display reached out and grabbed her throat, pulling her backwards. A bad puppet is of no use to me. I have been waiting for you. There's nothing to be done. One must really die good. Aislinn screamed, trying to throw the puppets off. She twisted in their grip, seeing the cracks grow wider and wider. When you're not real, nothing hurts, Aislinn. But the more I try to be real, the more I feel pain. Oh, the pain. How painful this is. Can't you feel it? The creaking of the rope was unbearable. The spiraling voice wailing and wailing as she begged for this to stop, for her to wake up, to let this nightmare end. Aislinn woke in her chair. The clock read the same time as it had before, but something was different. Everything was different. At some point, the gentle light of the afternoon had faded into a gray gloom bordering on darkness. This day seemed to be lasting an eternity. It was all a nightmare, a terrible nightmare. She saw it then. Her vision narrowed, and her chest tightened as she stared at it. The painting, mocking her from the back, as it always had. Maybe this was still a nightmare taken new form. Those horrible skulls leering at her, that noise, that endless noise. She approached it slowly and ran her hands over the cracks in the glass, feeling her skin crawl with revulsion. The glass was cold, unnaturally cold, like it was sucking the little warmth she had left from her fingers. I want to be real, Aislinn. A voice whispered in her ear, you should let me out. I have waited so long. She grabbed the poker from where it lay on the ground and lifted it, bringing it down to strike the glass. A gloved hand reached out of the frame and snatched hold of her wrist, forcing her to drop the poker in shock. A puppet has no soul, but it can do harm. It cackled, drawing her closer to the frame. You're my puppet now. Your soul is mine. No! She screamed, grabbing at the nearest object, a porcelain bird, and throwing it at the puppet. You aren't real. None of this is real. She felt the world begin to blur and tried to pull away from its grip. But it was too late. This couldn't be it. This couldn't be how this ended for her. This wasn't fair. This wasn't fair. You aren't real, she cried as her mind began to break. You aren't real. She felt the rancid breath of the puppet as it whispered in her ear, and now neither are you, the demon in the portrait. Denise Gray looked away from her reflection in the store window. The sight of that perfectly proportioned young body only served to remind her of the curse. As a young woman, she'd posed for an enigmatic artist who had painted her picture while spinning words that were at once wonderful and frightening. It hadn't been long after that she learned the reality of the painting and its associated curse. One day, she was accosted by a thief. And before she realized what was happening, he had run a dagger through her heart. She cringed, but when the thief pulled the knife out, there was no blood where she had been stabbed. A swift kick to the groin sent him running, but when she opened her now ruined blouse, she realized that she was unharmed, not even a scratch. Denise thought about it and realized that her situation was like a story her mother had told her, called The Painting of Dorian Gray. Damn, she whispered as she scraped her knee on a large rock that she'd brushed against, only to look down and realize that her forever young body was still unharmed. She realized that she would have to return to the artist's studio. And if that painting was damaged, she would have to force the artist to find a way to lift the curse without killing her before her time. When she returned to confront the artist, she found him hanging in his studio, dead. Her search for the painting in his studio was in vain, and it was only after another attack that she realized the truth of the curse. The knife had pierced her heart. But again, she felt no pain after the knife had been pulled from her chest. She tracked the painting down to a gallery in a distant town, only to watch the painting destroyed by fire as the gallery burned to the ground, killing the hundreds of people inside. She'd spent many hours waiting for the death that never came. After that, she tried every means of killing herself, but to no avail. Finally, she felt a glimmer of hope as she learned of a book of paintings that had a copy of her painting in it. That book was rumored to be in this tiny library. She took a deep breath as she approached the tiny library. She knew she had to do something, or she would go insane from not being able to die. Denise had arrived just as Jessie had left the library and moved toward the tavern. An hour while the poor, pregnant librarian took lunch wouldn't make a lot of difference, she thought as she sat down on a nearby bench. She smiled as a group of children ran by. One little brown-eyed girl stopped and smiled back, then ran to join her friends. "The book you want is here," Jessie said, "but you may be disappointed. The book is a manual for destroying demons." "I don't feel like a demon," Denise said. Jessie slid the leather hand-bound book toward Denise. "What happens if I open it?" Jessie shrugged. "I haven't read that far." Denise felt a tingling race up her arm as she pulled the book toward herself. What if she got sucked into the book when she opened it? She looked down at her ruined blouse. She'd neglected to change the blouse, even though she had another in her small travel bag. Throwing caution to the wind, she opened the book. Being stuck in the book would be no worse than not being able to kill herself. The first thing she saw was a horrible version of herself. Her hair was singed, and every injury she'd sustained in getting there had scarred over. When she could finally pull her eyes away from the picture, she began to read. The demon her painting had become had spoken from the painting and convinced the artist to hang himself. Then she had started the fire that destroyed the original painting, killing all the people there for the unveiling. Denise slammed the book closed. The pull of the woman in the painting was more than she could stand. "Are you affected as well?" Denise asked, only to be met by a blank stare from Jessie. A few moments later, her unborn child kicking wildly stirred Jessie back to life. "We have to destroy the book," Denise said. Jessie shook her head. "She will take us all with her." Denise slammed her hand down on the book before Jessie could open it. "That's exactly what she wants you to think. But trust me," Jessie's unborn baby kicked so hard that she gasped. "I can't help you. I'll take care of it," Denise said, taking the book and leaving the library. Denise counted herself lucky that the tiny library was on a small tropical island with an active volcano. It would only take her half a day to get to the volcano cone, light the book on fire, and drop it into the liquid lava below. She only hoped that would be enough. As she moved toward the volcano, the book and the demon it contained recognized her intent. "Hand over that book," the huge Polynesian man standing in her way said, his gun drawn. On some level, Denise knew that the man was under the influence of the demon. She ran around him and felt the bullet from his gun rip through the ruined blouse and on through her right shoulder. By the time she reached the trail at the edge of the volcano, she could feel the demon trying to stop her. Branches and thorns reached out for her, only to rip more holes in her ruined blouse as she ran toward the summit. Finally, she reached the edge of the cauldron and the bubbling lava below. "No!" The sound of the wind and the rush of the heat shouted as the edges of the book began to smoke. The book burst into flames as she tossed the book toward the lava. It hung suspended above the lava, flaming bigger and brighter, but without being consumed. Suddenly, she noticed that the young girl she'd seen before had caught up to her. It's drawing power from your blouse. Denise shook her head. None of this made sense. The blouse had taken the brunt of the damage inflicted on her, and was ragged and full of holes. You have to destroy the blouse as well, the girl said, before racing away from the lip. At the bottom of the trail, she saw the other children blocking the way of the adults who were under the influence of the book. Denise turned to see flame explode from the book and realized that she had no choice. If destroying the blouse didn't work, she would have to offer herself to the volcano. But this glimmer of hope had given her a reason to live. She pulled the remains of that ruined blouse off and threw it down at the boiling lava below. The atmosphere around the book howled in rage as the blouse fluttered to the surface of the lava and then burst into flames. The book exploded, scattering burning ash over everything. Before Denise could react, the same young girl was pulling her away from the lip of the cauldron. She stumbled into the group and children, and then her world went black. Denise remembered that blouse as the one that the artist had insisted she wear while he worked on the painting. What happened after that was a blur until that book exploded over the cauldron. She took a deep breath and opened her eyes to the soft light of the sun coming in through the curtains of a cottage near the ocean. It was a dream, she thought, until she realized that she wasn't wearing the blouse anymore. The painting and the book had been destroyed, but she didn't know about the curse. She inspected her body and then wrapped a sheet around her till she could find some clothes. Denise opened the door and saw children playing in front of the cottage, then stepped onto the porch and noticed a thorny bush near the steps into the yard. She idly pricked her finger and gave a sigh of relief as she realized that the curse was gone when a tiny drop of blood formed on her finger. "The children told us how you saved us," Jessie said as she approached from the side yard. Denise shrugged. "I needed to be free of the curse," Jess smiled. "The children like having you around, and we are in the market for school teacher." Denise had never considered anything like this. She'd been so young when the nightmare started. She looked down. Her body was still young, and if the kids had trusted her, maybe she could try. It beats modeling, she thought, as she followed Jessie back toward the cottage. I met death last night. Being alone in one of London's many streets, I was already cold. But his presence behind me was more than that. It was ice. Sharp, hard ice that seared through my flesh, traveled through my blood, urging goosebumps to shoot out of my skin. When I turned down the lonely alley, I regretted it instantly. It was said that he lingered in dark streets, waiting for a desperate soul to pass him by. But still, I had decided to keep going. Arriving in London on the night of my sister's birthday was already fine, but her party had begun at 8 p.m., and I didn't need to look at my watch to know that it was way past that already. She would kill me for being late. So late. But that wasn't the only reason I dared not turn back. It had been too long since I'd last walked these streets. Since I'd last felt the heavy air of London pressing down on me, clogging my lungs with soot and smoke. Life on the road had made me lighter, more restless. But coming back here was like stepping into a grave. The city had a way of sinking its teeth into you, of making you forget where you'd been and why you'd left. Fearing death was childish. My parents had told me as such when I refused to go on one of the rides at the festival extravaganza during our trip to America. But this was different. Like the images in my mind of falling from great heights and being trampled by horses had cleared, revealing something so impossible that it was the only thing my mind deemed plausible. He was behind me. I did not turn around. I did not blink. My eyes remained open, forgetting how dry they had become. I just stood there, an invisible force stopping my feet from taking off into a run, from sprinting around corners and through streets until he would inevitably catch me. I wondered what it would feel like. A sudden pain in my chest, a fog corrupting my mind. My vision slowly dimmed until I drifted off into a never-ending, dreamless sleep. Or maybe I would feel nothing. Maybe I would be awake 1 second, thinking of all the ways I was going to die, and the next I would be lying on the ground, waiting for someone to find me. Although by then, it would be too late. No one could ever be saved. The goosebumps grew larger as his presence sauntered towards me, like prey waiting for the predator, knowing that it was neither fast enough nor strong enough to face it. I thought about all those moments I had let slip through my fingers, all those opportunities I had missed out on, all those potential friends, and more that I had hung back from, thinking that I wasn't worth their time. Now, I thought that I should have chosen who was worth my time, for it was going to be shorter than anyone would have expected. And who would have blamed them for thinking I had all the time in the world? I always thought, never did. Always calculated, never acted. Always worried about others, and never spared a thought for myself. Now, just like then, I waited. He was as silent as the night. The once cawing crows and hissing cats were already in mourning. He stood right behind me, dark as a shadow. His breath a gentle breeze against my neck. The single word spoken in a voice rich in charm, alluring me to turn around, to face the predator, but I did not turn around. Still, I did not blink. The feeling in my fingers came back, and I was met with the warmth of coming out of an ice bath into the blazing sun. My feet began to move, the invisible force gone like it was never there. And soon I was running through winding streets, trying to think of anything but what had just happened. I'm late, I thought. I'm so late. And my sister will be mad. I tried to convince myself that was why I was running. Nothing happened. I saw nothing. My breath tore through the night's air as my book struck the slick cobblestones. Gas lamps fought against the choking fog, blinding me. The stray hairs that I had forgotten to shave on my arms stood up as ice invaded my lungs once more. No, please no. I had heard people talk about terror whipping through them, causing them to panic and shake. But that was a lie. Terror didn't come all at once. It came in waves, each one bigger than the last, freezing my lungs and clenching my throat in a vice-like grip. Why did I think that I could outrun him? Why did I think I could outrun the inevitable? I looked down at my pale skirts, now splattered in mud, and refused to look up again. The shock of what I might see would kill me before he did. He made no sound as he approached for the second time. No footsteps, no shift of breath or fabric. Just the sudden, certain sense of him standing before me. Close, too close. My eyes stayed down. I could feel him watching me, the weight of his gaze pressing against my skin like the brush of fingertips. My breath hitched. My fingers curled into the folds of my dress. He said nothing. He did nothing. Just stood there, silent and motionless. The seconds stretched and broke. My pulse thudded in my throat like the fear in my stomach, mixing with something warmer, darker beneath my ribs. I imagined what his eyes must have been like. Dark, unblinking, tracing the line of my collarbone and the curve of my mouth. Then, just as quietly as he had come, he left for the second time in a single hour. Slowly, cautiously, I dared to lift my head. The street was empty again, mist curling through the dim light. I waited for what might have been seconds or minutes. I didn't know. But I managed to walk again. But I didn't run. I no longer cared that I was late. Finally, I reached it. A tall iron gate, its surface slick with rain that I hadn't realized was falling. A footman in a crisp coat stood at attention beneath a gaslight's feeble glow, his face blank under the brim of his hat. His eyes sharpened when he saw me. Without a word, he pushed the gate open, allowing me to slip through. The moment the gate clicked shut behind me, the street's grim chill seemed to dissolve. A long, white, gravel path wound through manicured gardens, lit by golden candles and strung by iron posts. Tall windows loomed over me as music floated through the air. As soon as I made it into the house, I passed the polished wood and gilded mirrors, up the stairs to the spare bedroom where I flopped onto the well-made bed, ignoring the state of my clothes. Did I feel bad for leaving my sister on her birthday? Of course, but I just couldn't cope with anyone or anything. I didn't think I could even fall asleep, no matter how much my body craved it. I had spent so long moving from place to place, never staying long enough to leave a mark, never bothering to make ties. I told myself it was because I liked the freedom, the open road, the thrill of waking up in a new city with new faces. But the truth was simpler. It was easier not to care when you knew you wouldn't stay long enough to lose anything. I met death last night, and I lived the quiet before. I bent low over the painting, the tip of my brush dotting at the corner of the landscape. It was just a tree, after all. But the spot of varnish that had welled up and discolored over the years needed to be removed. When the acetone leached into the surface, it peeled back, and my heart clenched. As the varnish removed a layer of paint, it revealed a subtle, dark patch of pigment beneath its surface. I sat back, a chill running through me. Underpainting. Maybe a hidden painting? I held my breath and stripped off my rubber gloves as I leaned back from the canvas. The visible image was a simple landscape, rolling hills and a few meandering roads, the colors muted by age and dust. The sky was a washed-out blue, and the trees on the horizon seemed too far off to be of much importance. It was nothing special, but that was never the point. What mattered now was finding out what lay beneath. I put on fresh gloves and lifted the painting with care. The canvas felt heavier than it should have, and I walked slowly over to the imaging lab. I positioned it carefully on the table, making sure that it was level, before placing the X-ray scanner above the canvas. The machine hummed to life, and I stepped back to the desk as the images slowly appeared on the screen. Beneath the visible landscape, buried under layers of thick, muddled paint, was a face. It was likely a woman, as I could see brush strokes of long hair curling around her face beneath the layers. The image was ghostly, faint, and slightly blurred, but unmistakable. A portrait. The faint outline of her features, her eyes staring somewhere just beyond the frame, sent a shiver through me. She was there, just beneath the surface. I didn't need to look at the X-ray again. I'd seen enough. I grabbed my phone and quickly searched for the artist's name. It was barely anything, just some obscure mentions in art journals, but something about it felt wrong. There had to be more. I spent the next few days buried in the archives. The museum had extensive access to resources on all sorts of artists, but the painting's creator remained elusive. There was nothing concrete about him, just scraps of details on a man who seemed as obscure in life as he was in death. The painting, this painting, felt like a living thing, pulling me deeper into its mystery, one layer at a time. The more I uncovered, the more I realized how much there was to discover. As I attempted to track down her creator, I peeled back the landscape layer by layer, revealing the portrait of a strange, haunting woman. Her pale face was framed by dark flowing hair that reached her shoulders. Her gaze was distinct, distant, yet her features soft, as though she's looking at something or someone beyond my reach. There was a haunting grace, a quiet calm to her, but an unsettling depth in her eyes. The light in the portrait was soft and diffused, casting a faint glow on her skin and creating gentle shadows under her cheekbones, giving her face an almost ethereal quality. She sat as though she is regal, with a slender curve to her neck, though her pose was rigid and upright. Her gown looked heavy and richly textured, and almost blurred into the darker background. I found myself losing time, focus, and all sense of responsibility to this woman. Time had started to slip away in ways I couldn't explain. Days melted into one another, the world around me a blur as I spent more time with her. But no matter how much I uncovered, there was always a feeling that I was just scratching the surface. I pulled the stack of archived files towards me and sighed. Taking another sip of the peach energy drink I'd come to rely on during these long stints of hunting down the elusive painter of the hidden woman. I'd discovered his name was Luigi Diovina. But beyond that, there were mere snippets of his life. An article about his madness toward the end of his life, and a lost last painting commissioned for a baroness. That article had sent a shiver up my spine. Could this be that painting? If so, I'd found a hidden treasure, but the baroness remained unnamed, leaving me with no way to verify who she was. I leaned back in the chair, my eyes falling once more on the image of the woman. I hadn't been able to stop thinking about her. I wasn't the only one noticing the strain. Clara, Jenna, a senior restorer, pulled me aside. "You've got to get back to the other works. The other paintings are falling behind. Victor has been asking about the St. Catherine piece. The museum's losing patience." I nodded, though I couldn't shake my growing unease. "I'll catch up," I murmured, but even I didn't believe it. I couldn't focus on anything else. The painting, the Baroness had started to call her, had started to become the only thing I could focus on. Even when I tried, I found myself returning to the painting, as if it were calling to me. The woman's eyes seemed to follow me wherever I went. The deeper I investigated her, the more she began to consume my thoughts, my every waking moment. The article had come from a dusty file in the back of the local library, one that had been buried on microfiche and stuffed away in a back room somewhere. I'd had to bribe the front desk worker with a box of donuts and a large coffee, so she'd dig it out for me. But once I'd scrolled through 3 years' worth of articles on local auctions, I finally struck pay dirt. Haunted painting sells at auction. Deadly Baroness's portrait said to haunt Diavina's last known work, the headline read, giving much more detail than any other piece ever had. Though the Baroness was still unnamed, the full article mentioned the painter's dying days. Diavina's obsession with his final portrait left him a shadow of the man he once was. Those who knew him said he would often stand in front of the canvas, seemingly lost to time, as though the woman's eyes spoke to him. In his last weeks, it was rumored he painted over the face of the woman. This had to be the painting, but how had it ended up in our archives? Why had he painted over her face? The deeper I uncovered the painting, the more I believed that the woman, her secrets, were pulling me into a vortex of obsession, just as they had Diavina, Clara. My head jerked up, the soft brush in my hand. The Baroness's eyes were inches from mine, her creamy skin slowly being cleaned at my skillful hands. I blinked and sat back, gazing around the room for the source of my name. But no one was around. The office was strangely empty. I stretched my back, leaning slightly over the chair, and stood up to walk down the hall. Empty. And it was dark. Curious, I walked a few steps towards the archives room. "Clara!" I whipped around. No one was there, but the voice had come from my office. I rushed back in, but found only the Baroness staring at me. Why were her eyes fixed on me? Her gaze had moved. Her eyes seemed to be fixed on me, just as obsessed with me as I was with her. As I stepped around the stacks of files, my tools, and other paintings I'd neglected in favor of the Baroness, her eyes followed me around the room. I slowly sat down on the stool I'd left in front of her, sitting eye to eye with her. It was only us in the room, no one else. The next day, I gazed around Vincent's office as he sat in front of me. His arms were crossed over his chest, and the furrow in his brow only deepened as he watched me fidgeting. "Clara," he said, catching my attention. I glanced up quickly, my eyes locking on his face. "I understand that you're passionate about the restoration, but we're running a museum, not a one-woman project. You've been neglecting the other pieces for weeks now. You know how important the St. Catherine piece is." If it isn't ready by the next exhibition, I'll get to it, I said, cutting him off. I blinked rapidly. The St. Catherine piece was complex, but it was just a cleaning job, and since I didn't need to paint anything, I'd be able to finish it quickly. Clara? My eyes widened as the familiar, haunting voice called my name. Do you realize how much time you've spent on this? Vincent paused, his eyes narrowing as he searched for the right words. This obsession. Don't ignore me. I closed my eyes and pressed my fingers to my forehead. I forced myself to meet his gaze. I'll get it done. I just need a little more time. Vincent let out a frustrated sigh, his hands running through his hair. I need you to refocus. We can't afford this. Not with the exhibit coming up. Clara! My head snapped up, but it was just me and Vincent in the room. I glanced down, my heart pounding. His hands were strained, the same rusty red as the Baroness's dress, the splotches covering his fingers and seeping into his nail beds. Clara, Vincent said sternly, though his voice was also tinged with worry. You're letting everything else slip. He flicked through his computer and turned it to me, his stained fingers showing CCTV footage of the archives. And, is that me? I asked, gazing at the screen. Yes. You stood there for an hour like that, Clara. And this is at... His voice trailed off as he checked the timestamp. His face grew increasingly lined with worry. The point is, you haven't been yourself. You look like you haven't slept in days, Clara. This isn't you. Go home. Get some rest, he said, sighing as he adjusted the screen back to normal. I stood, and without hesitating, I left his office. And don't do anything with that painting, he called as I stalked out. But it was calling me. She was calling me. I glanced into the studio from the sliver of a window in the door. Through the frosted glass, I could see a distorted view of the painting sitting on an easel at my workstation. I could see her outline, the delicate slope of her neck, and the blood red of her robes. Suddenly, a shadowy figure moved across the threshold of my door, and I jumped back, startled. I hesitated, struck by fear. Not that someone had broken into my office, but that someone was going to take the Baroness from me. I turned the doorknob, but of course, I'd locked it, and I could see her right there. She was right there. A chill swept through me, and I shivered, closing my eyes as I dropped my hand from the door. When I got home, I was a little shocked to see Ethan on the couch, anxiously texting people. "You're home?" I said, dropping my keys and messenger bag by the door and taking off my coat. He gazed up at me and tilted his head. "You're home," he said worriedly. There was no warmth to his voice, as if he was put out with me. I furrowed my brow. "Yeah, Vincent sent me home early said I looked tired. What, early? It's 9 p.m., Clara, Ethan said, putting his phone down. I blinked and looked out the window, my stomach clenching. He stood up, moving over to me as he noted the look of confusion on my face. What's going on, Clara? He asked quietly. He reached out to rest his hand on the small of my back, but I pulled away, a feeling of overwhelming anxiety rolling through me. Nothing. I can't. I shook my head and then glanced up at him. I can't remember what I did. Vincent sent me home at 11? I said, my stomach twisting again. I leaned into the kitchen counter, holding it tightly. Ethan looked shocked, his lips parting to calculate the math. Okay, it's fine. We'll figure it out. You've just been stressed with the exhibition coming up, and all the work, he said, rubbing my back gently. I shook my head, reaching for my bag and rifling through it. My fingers crossed over something cold and metallic. I furrowed my brow and pulled out the ring of archive keys. It jingled in my hand, and I closed my eyes, shaking my head. Why do you? Ethan began, but I cut him off. I must have just shoved them in my bag. It's fine, I said, taking a deep breath. I put the keys gently back into my bag and took out my phone again, checking the time. It's late. I'm late. I came home late. I'm just tired, I said slowly, rationalizing things to myself. Okay? Do you want to just call it a night? Get some rest? Maybe a shower? Ethan asked. I saw his nose crinkle from the corner of my eye. Did I stink? My jaw twitched as I bit my cheek. Yeah? I nodded, but couldn't help the feeling that Diavina's barrenness had something to do with the loss of time. I closed my eyes, and Ethan brushed my hair back from my face. Okay, I said, pulling away from him. He looked sad, but didn't move towards me as I stalked off to our bedroom, my phone held loosely in my fist. I stepped into the hallway leading to our bedroom, the light from the kitchen spilling across the dark-toned wood behind me. As I stepped towards the darkened bedroom, I felt adrift, and my head felt heavy. I stopped at the doorway and lifted my head. My fingers paused on the light switch. The room glowed with the dull orange light from the street lamp that streamed through the curtains. It made for an eerie sort of atmosphere. But that's not why I paused. My eyes were locked on the full-length mirror across the room from me. Its glassy surface should reflect only the bed, maybe the edge of my body, not the full shadow that stood ominously facing me. I blinked, frozen in place as I stared at the shadow. It almost pulsated, its shoulders hunched. It wasn't exactly shapeless, but it didn't have any defining features. Still, It felt familiar in a way it shouldn't have been. My fingers twitched, brushing the edge of the light switch. I took a shaky breath. I flipped the switch, and the figure was gone as soon as light flooded the room. The mirror was empty. My chest clenched painfully, and I leaned against the doorframe. Slowly, I flicked the light again. There she was, dominating the mirror, a black mass. But I knew her. I knew who she was. I flicked the light on again, and she was gone. But just as quickly, I flicked it off, and she was there. Panic rose like a bile in my throat. Distantly, as if underwater, I could hear Ethan calling to me, but his words were lost. Because the Baroness was calling me, her voice was rising in a screaming ring in my ears. I trembled with fear as I stepped towards the mirror, towards her. My mind fought my body as deep, panicky breaths burst from my chest. As I stepped up to the mirror, the shadow swelled and blossomed, the shrill screams rising to fever pitch in my ears. A hand wrapped around my shoulder just as the mirror shattered. It's with great pleasure that we present the final restored work of Luciano Diovina, the Baroness. Its beauty belies its tragic past, and we are proud to display it as a memorial to our departed co-worker. Vincent held the champagne glass aloft, then took a sip and stepped down from the podium. Beside him, the Baroness had been artfully restored, her colors vibrant, her skin creamy, her robes deep and gory slash of blood red. She looked almost youthful, brought back to life at Clara's skilled hands. It's a shame. An older woman stands next to a younger one, both eyeing the Baroness and the in memoriam plaque that had been hung next to her frame. The younger one nods, glancing nervously at the portrait. It's tragic. But did you hear about what happened with her boyfriend? I mean, the portrait, sure, it's gorgeous, but I heard it was bad. They glance at the painting. Like gruesome. Like she was obsessed? They cut off, clearly unsure how much to say. The older co-worker's voice drops even lower. Obsessed doesn't even cover it. But you didn't hear it from me. It's a horrible end, though. They each sip their champagne, the younger one shivering as if she said too much. The older glances down at her watch. Come on. The presentation. We're late. High-speed train. Congressman David Chen found himself where he never guessed he'd be. The dining car on the express. A high-speed train humming through the Hungarian countryside. A patchwork of browns and gray dirty snow flashed by. Abandoned Soviet-era factories passed surreal in skeletal frames, riddled with broken windows and crumbling walls. David's head pounded. Nausea caused him to sweat. He hated trains, but loved his wife. And the Prague conference was over. Just one more meeting, and then he and his wife could take a river cruise out of Budapest. Studying the wine list across from David sat Marcus Blackwood. When the waiter came, he ordered a 2016 Tokaji. The waiter paused and bit his lower lip, avoiding Blackwood's eyes. "We only have a 2018. Your boss promised the 2016, Blackwood said, stroking his precisely trimmed stubble. "I suggest you find it, or else." David noted his old friend, the Blackwood he'd grown up with, the new director of Aid Alliance, had mastered making threats. "Trains have a finite quality," Blackwood mused as they waited for the wine. "Once you're on them, you can't get off." David sipped water from a crystal glass. "But you can change the destination. That depends on who's controlling the switches," Blackwood said. "By the way, how's your Sarah? She starts Columbia in the fall. Is that right? The tuition must be a killer." His stomach rolled over. How did Blackwood know about the Columbia acceptance letter? "She's fine. Elizabeth and I are quite proud of her. I saw you with Elizabeth at the Prague conference. Vacation? Yes, doubling up the conference with time in Budapest." Blackwood winked. "And a write-off for the entire trip?" Blackwood tossed his right hand. "I was thinking about how we've known each other since the early days. Hell, I was at your wedding. We're warriors, you and I. Into the breach and all that. Well, this warrior is getting tired of the congressional grind. I'm thinking of not running next term. Call it quits." Blackwood laughed, his thick frame tight against his dress shirt. "Say it ain't so." "No, I would quit, but there's more I want to do. A few years, maybe. Then on to the speaker circuit. Or maybe a pack." The waiter returned with a 2016. "We're in luck, Mr. Blackwood." He opened the wine, offered a taste, then served them both. He carefully placed the bottle on the immaculate white tablecloth. "About your upcoming committee vote," Blackwood said. "Aid distribution, of course, is of paramount importance. But with our audit showing only 30 cents on the dollar reaching recipients, there's some pushback we're fighting against." "I've reviewed the proposal," David said. $8 billion might take some time to get through committee." Blackwood adjusted his broad shoulders and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "We need to think about this from the 30,000-foot view," he said. "After all, think of the optics. We're supporting democracy, fighting corruption, and aiding fledgling governments who need the world's help." The waiter refilled their wine glasses while the two men looked on. When he left, Blackwood gulped his wine, leaned into the table, and reached out to adjust David's tie. "Our organization believes there's a benefit to a network of partners. We need expertise to walk us through a complex banking system, the regulatory environment. Would you consider getting involved?" A non-profit, hip deep in money laundering, David thought. Excessive compensation, shell companies. A big plunge for a guy who doesn't fudge on taxes. Never has. Never will. I'm a congressman. I can't touch this, you know that, David said. No, no, no. Your role would be legitimate, I assure you, Blackwood said. That's what the advisory board is all about. Insurance for, he chuckled, derailments. We want you as a board member after your term ends. It's just, well, in the meantime, we'd like your advice. As a friend. The dulled rush of an opposing train sped by their window. Blackwood steepled his hands in front of him. How's Elizabeth's gallery, by the way? Her art might be worth more once she's passed. Of course, that could be decades away. We certainly don't want any harm to come to her, do we? Blackwood looked down and cut another piece of his steak. David's fork froze on the way to his mouth. He felt anger ripping his insides at the veiled threat against his wife. After slowly setting his fork down, he picked up his wine glass. His hand shook as he gripped the glass, but he gripped harder, and then harder still. The train entered a tunnel. David lost his concentration, diverted by the sudden brightness of the two men's reflection in the window. He stared at the image, but the man in the reflection who looked like him didn't stare back, but shattered the glass with his hand. David stared, transfixed. His reflection picked up a shard with his bleeding hand and wrapped the pointed glass with his cloth napkin. He then reached across the table and slashed Blackwood's throat. Blood splattered on the table as the reflection of Blackwood collapsed. The reflection blanked out as the train shot from the tunnel exit, the horn howling into the twilight. David stared at the wine glass in his hand. Blackwood was no longer across from him. David stumbled from the dining car. He lurched down the corridor to his sleeper cabin, fell into Elizabeth as she opened the door, reeled to the water closet, and retched in the toilet. "David, what happened?" Elizabeth called through the door. "My God!" The train approached the outskirts of the city, high-rises ahead pinned to the night sky, the lights in the windows staring down. Soon the train squealed into the station. Elizabeth gripped her husband's arm as they walked to the taxi stand, her eyes riveted on his face. "David? Darling? Are you okay? What happened?" "It's nothing," he said. She held him closer. "Are you feeling better? Talk to me. Did you forget anything?" David steadied himself against his wife. "No, I haven't left anything." As they walked to the taxi stand, he felt in his gut that Blackwood was gone. He realized he'd left him on the train. Some things you can never explain, he thought. But then he felt oddly privileged. He smiled, and even the grime of Budapest tasted a little cleaner. Fate, or science, or the devil himself had stepped in. But not God, he thought. No, this wasn't God. It was another presence, who didn't like the alliance weighing the direction of his daughter's future. his wife's safety, or the price for his looking the other way. "Your hand's bleeding," Elizabeth said. "It looks like a piece of glass." The midnight ride. It was a dark night, one of those without any stars to look at, and a dark moon. Not even the universe was interested in what was about to happen. There was no spotlight over me, nor a guiding light to help me escape. As I ran to my car, one of my heels broke, and I twisted my ankle. I took out the shoes and limped to the door while looking for the keys in my purse. Damn big fancy bags. This whole scenario would have been much easier with jeans and sneakers. But that was not something I could change, and dreaming about better times would not help me either. My hands were trembling, and I was about to empty the bag when I touched the furry pom-pom I had attached to my keychain days before. I took out the keys, opened the door, and once I was inside, I locked the car. The street was empty. No one was screaming my name or running after me, and I took a deep breath before starting the motor. When I passed the campus gates, I felt light and smiled. I was free, and I felt happy. Before entering the highway, I stopped at the last traffic light and adjusted the mirror. I could not even remember the last time I touched it. And then, when I lowered it, I saw them smiling at me and waving. I tried to open the door. I wanted to jump out, but Amir moved his arm to my neck and pinned me to my seat. Ezra moved to the front slowly, while I struggled to move or breathe. Suddenly, everything hurt, and I did the only thing I could. I pushed the gas pedal with my foot, and my ankle cracked, making the pain even worse. Ezra took the wheel, while I tried to free myself from the strangling arm. But Amir whispered in my ear, "This will happen whether you like it or not. I gave you the choice." His teeth sank into my neck, and as the pressure increased in my skin and the wound started to burn, I felt my life running away from me. The blood spilt over my white dress, forming stains that seemed broken rose petals. And shortly after, my head fell on Ezra's lap, and the car stopped in the middle of the highway. "Move her," said Amir. And Ezra grabbed my body and threw it to the back seat like I was weightless. Amir sat in the driver's seat, and once Ezra sat by his side, the car started again. I could barely breathe. The only thought in my mind was how much blood I had lost, and how much more was now running down the leather I was lying in. I had no more pain, but I was starting to feel cold. And although I wanted desperately to scream and cry, I just couldn't. He betrayed me, I thought. He's helping him. I heard the sound of the radio buzzing, and then the music. Sympathy for the devil. Really? I thought, and I felt like laughing, though I couldn't. Would he now take the end of his sleeves and take them out of his jacket? What would the 16-year-old me have done in this situation? I should have been given an option and not forced into this. The sun was rising when I woke up. Everything around me was flooded with orange light, and I felt the warmth as the first rays touched my skin. I did not want to open my eyes fully, but I understood I was not gone, at least not completely, which meant I still had the right to see the sun again. It burned at first, though. Everything hurt, but I did not mind. It was like something else was pushing for me, and my body did not belong to me anymore. I was still in the back of the car, and my dress and the seat were drenched in red. My blood. How had I lost so much blood? Why was I awake? I raised my head, and my neck cracked. I never liked that sound, but that day, it was scarier than ever. The light passing through the front window blinded me for a second, but when I got used to it, I saw someone sitting in the passenger seat. I opened my mouth, but the words did not come out. Ezra, I thought, convinced that I still had that power on me, that he would listen to my thoughts, that he would attend my command if Amir were far away from us. Ezra, please. But he did not turn. I moved my arm. I wanted to sit, but I couldn't. My limbs failed me, and the only thing I managed was to grab his arm and fall to the car floor. He moved then, but not the way I expected. I was still holding his sleeve when I saw the blood crossing his arm, the wound in his neck, and his eyes opened, lost, lifeless. Then someone opened the door, grabbed me by the ankles, and dragged me out of the car. I felt the pain once more, like someone was stabbing me with those expensive shoes I had bought weeks before. When my head hit the floor, I closed my eyes. I did not want to see what was about to happen. You complain too much, said Amir, though I knew I was the only one who could hear him. There he was, again, inside my head. You are such a romantic, he continued. He was not helpful, no matter how much you tried to make him. He was not worthy. He helped you, I thought. He was just a pretty puppet. And the puppets are good to play. I still had my eyes closed and felt a tear running down my face. He'll kill me. This all will pass, I thought. Don't be ridiculous, I heard. We have work to do. I don't like to waste talent, tama, or blood. You should know that about me already. After getting rid of Ezra, he lifted my body as if I were a little rag doll and sat me in the passenger seat. The leather was sticky and smelled funny, but sweet. You'll recover soon. Don't worry. You'll be buying new shoes in no time, he said as he started the car and put on his sunglasses. The car moved away, and as the sunlight warmed my face, I knew I'd have to come up with a better plan to leave that life, that work, And that man, rambling Rose, "I'm late!" Life always passes over me. "I'm late" is just another phrase for situation normal. Absolutely fluffed up. "Did you put in your application, Rosie?" An unnecessary question, probably motivated by a sense of duty. I give my usual frown and grimace, a sigh, an "I don't care, but will try to appear concerned" look. The office crew is sniffing each other out. They're silently musing on the expected unfairness, their anticipated realization of failure, judging nepotism or brown-nosing from each participant. Jones, from service and repair, has been studying his policies. Gretel has finished her Certificate 4 in admin. Will is confident and also disgruntled because he has been at the WAM desk for 3 years and feels he deserves the promotion. Georgia has made coffee for the PA to the director every day for the last 2 months, and today has homemade chocolate brownies. The bright young things wander confidently, secretive, holding clipboards, adjusting their ties and hair clips. It's a yearly raise of $20K, and not to be ignored. But I most studiously ignored it. The primitive yearning for some freedom has snared its unrealistic teeth right into my IT life. Hell, I don't even know what the word means. I haven't read Jack Kerouac, but sense that this might be one of life's moments when Kerouac isn't just a writer. Kerouac is where I want to be. Pens, wads of reports, tea bags, coffee bags, a banana already populated with several tiny Drosophilas, laptop charger, some screwed up piece of something, possibly a chocolate wrapper. Everything into the locker. Close the door tightly before anything falls out. There may be war once the position is filled. It's a late winter, but June in the Highlands is starkly beautiful, misty, haunting even. The trains have all left, and I park my red Subaru into a free parking lot. The sky is an empty gray slate, and the new moon barely lights the smooth concrete platform. I walk carefully to the graveled exit, look into the darkness, and start walking beside Highway number 1. Nobody would know if I am man or woman, as my hair is tucked into a black beanie. Nobody will try to stop for me, and I swagger, trying to look dangerous and unwelcome. My wind jacket is old and barely covers my hips. My tracky Dax, gray, also old. Just another vagabond itinerant wandering the roads. I step purposefully, too quickly, and slow myself. The journey, not the destination, I say. The crunch of the gravel beneath my rubber-soled gym shoes is satisfying. Each step releases its perfume of rain, oil, and petrol. I breathe its nourishment like a 4-year-old who has escaped from the front yard onto the street for the first time. A dog howls and then barks, and the cars gradually dissipate. At some point, I realize I am alone, even from any flow of traffic. It is 11 p.m. I have been walking for 3 hours. I breathe even more deeply. The air has chilled. A faint silhouette of bushland lines the horizon, and a small window twinkles somewhere on a hillside. As I walk, this small, friendly light disappears behind a ridge. A kookaburra announces something. It's time we all just went to sleep now. I will keep walking. I will keep walking until I want to stop. More hours pass by as I contemplate the stiffness in my calves, the ache in my arches, and the spots where my jacket does not cover my legs properly. The sky has started to reveal stars, hundreds of different-sized lights, satellites drifting through them. Betelgeuse and Sirius, Pleiades, Orion's belt, familiar sky landmarks that are warm to the touch. Homey reminders that I am not completely out of my mind. Excitement suddenly makes me look up and revel in the starry expanse. Some loose barbed wire behind a ditch at the side of the road looks promising, and I duck through it. I am starting to feel tired. An irrigation ditch with straight sides has been carved into the bare landscape, its straight sides starkly incongruent with the rocky outcrops and overgrazed land. A breeze has started up, and snow must have fallen in the mountains, as the wind is cold. I lie carefully in the ditch, careful not to wet my shoes, marveling at the convenience of a raised bed, however hard. Staring into the skies, I think, this is where I should have an epiphany. But what will it be? I am a traveler, a nomad, a gypsy on the road. This is where enlightenment and realization comes from. The cold is biting deep, and I cover spots alternatively when the pain gets too much. First my knees, then my torso, but never everything all at once. Looking imploringly into the stars, I let all sense of self leave me, my mind floating into that vast canopy. The cold makes me feel a bit sorry for myself, and I feel not just alone, but lonely. I think I slept, my icy dreams interspersed with awkward rearranging of the useless wind jacket. The romance of my zero-gravity bed, just a cold, hard slant with pointy pebbles pressing into my back and hips, a crackle of nearby dried grass, the swoosh of saltbush being brushed past, a movement so close that I lose my breath in terror. I jolted awake. Was this near where those hitchhikers had disappeared? What if there was a man with a hatchet studying me, waiting for me, a gun, an intent to harm me? My heart was in my ears, and I breathed noiselessly, trying to stop breathing so fast. I sink into the hard clay, just another boulder. Nobody here. After a half-hour of immobile silence, it seemed that the killer would have moved by now. But I slowly lifted my chin to survey what was behind me, above the ditch, expecting any moment my life could be taken from me. A snort in my ear, and a scuffle from all around where my head lay. A dozen sheep were startled from where they had been staring at me. They stood back, gazing at the intruder, and slowly backed off. I was safe. The sheep were my friends, my protectors. They trotted away quickly now that it was obvious what this warm, soft-bodied thing was. I stayed the next 2 days in a rented room, happily proud of the adventure. I even called Jones and congratulated him on his new interest in company policy. Surely this point will be noted by management as a sign he is a contender in the offing. We agreed that it was a done deal. Georgia's coffee-making was obsequiously good, and she was probably sleeping with the director anyway. I comforted Gretel and said she was far prettier than Georgia and had ethics, which Georgia patently did not. I put my hand on Will's shoulder and smiled. He'd get there soon, and was deserving. I might even explain my journey to Jones one day, but thought the better of it. I don't think he would understand. I barely could make sense of it myself. Gridlock of the mind. The 405 stretched endlessly before me, a vein of asphalt pulsing with the dull monotony of brake lights. Every morning, I merged into the current of half-conscious souls, each of us trapped in the same routine, inching forward to destinations we resented. My corporate job barely paid my bills, and my spirit eroded with each passing day. Yet, like a prisoner resigned to their cell, I got into my car every morning, hoping, futilely, that something, anything, would change. Today felt no different. The same stifling air, the same murmur of the radio, the same dull ache pressing behind my eyes. I stared ahead, watching as the red taillights blinked and glowed in a never-ending pattern, hypnotic in their rhythm. I sighed, my hands gripping the wheel. This wasn't life. This was something else, some cruel purgatory where change was an illusion. As I drove, a strange sensation washed over me, an unsettling tug at the back of my mind. It was faint at first, like the nagging feeling of forgetting something important. My fingers tightened around the steering wheel. Had I left the stove on? No, I hadn't cooked in days. My laptop? No, it was in my bag, thrown onto the passenger seat in my usual morning autopilot. Then what? My phone rang, vibrating against the plastic cup holder. The number flashed on the screen. Unknown. But I knew better. Bill collectors. I clenched my jaw before answering, already bracing myself. Hello? A voice on the other end rattled off my name, their tone all business, all demand. "We're calling about your outstanding balance." I exhaled sharply, my frustration boiling over. "Do you think I don't know that? Do you think I just forgot? I'm sitting in traffic, wasting my life away every single day to make barely enough to survive. And you think I magically have money for you? Tell me, how am I supposed to pay you when I can't even afford to live?" Silence. A pause. Then the collector launched into their script again, as if my words meant nothing. I hung up. Hard. The phone clattered onto the seat, and I turned the music up. Loud. A mix of music and Spotify affirmations played in an endless loop. "You are strong. You are capable," a voice repeated. But the words felt hollow against the weight pressing down on me. I switched back to music, something loud enough to drown it all out. But after a few minutes, I found myself back on the affirmations, searching for something, anything that might stick. "You are in control of your life," the voice insisted. I scoffed, flipping back to music again. The bass thumped through my chest, rattling through my bones, drowning out the rage, the helplessness, the crushing weight of it all. I shook the feeling off and pressed forward. But the thought gnawed at me, creeping into the corners of my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. The traffic slowed, locking me into a dead stop between exits. I drummed my fingers against the wheel, the silence growing unbearable. Something was wrong. Something was missing. The air inside the car felt heavier now, oppressive. I adjusted my rearview mirror and caught a glimpse of my own eyes, shadowed and hollow. Was it always this way? Was I always this way? The weight of exhaustion bore down on me. My limbs felt heavier than they should. Had I slept enough last night? Had I ever slept enough? I closed my eyes, taking slow, steady breaths. But when I opened them, the scenery outside seemed different. The colors muted, the sounds dampened. My vision blurred for a moment before snapping back into focus. But the creeping unease remained. I was losing time. One moment, I was at the interchange, and the next, I was pulling into the parking garage beneath my office building. My heart pounded as I stepped out of the car, my legs unsteady, as if I had forgotten how to walk. The air felt wrong, too thick, too still. I moved through the lobby, the fluorescent lights above buzzing softly, pressing against my skull like a dull migraine. The elevator doors slid open, and I stepped inside. The mirrored walls reflected me back at myself, and for a fleeting moment, I saw something else. A blur, a shadow of someone who wasn't quite me. I blinked, and it was gone. The doors opened to my floor, and I walked down the sterile hallway, my footsteps muffled against the carpet. My hands were cold, my breath shallow. My mind screamed at me to turn back, to run, but my body moved forward, as if caught in the undertow of a dream. I reached my office door, hesitated, then turned the knob. The room was dark. The air smelled of familiarity, of something deeply personal. My breath hitched as I took a step inside, and the walls expanded, morphing, shifting. No, I wasn't at the office. I was home. My bedroom lay before me, unchanged and untouched, as if I had never left. My unmade bed, the half-empty coffee cup on my nightstand, the soft hum of the city outside my window. I stumbled backward, my heart hammering. How? I had driven here. I had spent an hour in traffic. I had been walking into my office just moments ago. I turned, reaching for the door, but when I opened it, there was no hallway, just the same road, the same endless stretch of the 405. My hands trembled as I turned back toward my room, only to find it dissolving around me, slipping through my fingers like sand. And then I was back in my car. Traffic had barely moved. The radio played the same mindless chatter, and the clock on my dashboard blinked mockingly. 7:45 a.m., just like it always was. I let out a shaky breath, gripping the wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My skin felt cold. My pulse raced. What was real? Where had I been? And then the realization hit me. I was late. I was still home, still in bed, still asleep. The panic rose, clawing up my throat as I fumbled for my phone, desperate to check the time, to wake myself up. But when I looked down, my hands weren't there. The car, the traffic, the drive, it wasn't real. I never left my bed. I was still dreaming, or living a nightmare, over and over. Angry Highway by Stephen Scott. Get the hell out of the way. Jerry made sure to honk twice at the fellow in the fast lane. The car moved over, slowly. He moved closer to the man's bumper and flashed his headlights. Come on, stupid jerk. David clutched his armrest, trying to hide his fright. Jerry, calm down. He sped past the car, glancing over at the elderly man. What? You sidin' with that idiot? He was blocking the passing lane. David, hoping to dodge the blunt words of Jerry, countered with a calm voice. Well, you're almost 15 over the limit. Jerry glared at David sternly. I'm the professional here. The trainee sighed, revealing his agitation. Do you want to ride with me or not? Not liking the hostile tone, David sighed. I just want to learn the procedures. Jerry set the steering wheel between his legs, reached inside the bag, and pulled out his hamburger. He ate it, then glanced at his newspaper. David somehow hid his panic, reached over, and took hold of the steering wheel. "What the hell is wrong with you?" Jerry asked through his bites. "Just helping you out. I don't need your help. I do this all the time." David released his grip, fought his own irritation at Jerry's tone. David was the new guy and wanted a job, and certainly didn't want to piss off his trainer. He found a neutral subject. "So how long does the route take you?" "Some days it's longer," Jerry said between chews. "Some days I have to go to Weatherford or Mount Vernon. It depends on what the physicians in those towns need. It's pretty easy. I listen to the radio a lot, eat when I need to, take a dump when I need to. Seems like a lonely job." "It can be." He put down the food and paper and braked as he approached a slow truck. The highway reduced to 2 lanes, taking away a safe way pass. "Move it, jerk." It moved to the right slightly, but Jerry could not see around it. The truck slowed. "Move over, dipshit." Jerry pushed on the horn heavily. "I can't see." Although he saw a hill, he decided to go anyway. Pulling completely in the oncoming lane, he revved up the engine. A sports utility vehicle emerged in front of them. He sped up more, determined to get back over in front of the truck. The SUV slightly moved to the right while honking. Jerry accelerated his small pickup. "Shit," David whispered. He clutched the handle above his window as everything in his chest froze into a block of ice. Jerry zipped back to his lane with seconds to spare. Hearing both trucks honk at him, he stuck one hand out the window and extended his finger. "Jerks," he mumbled. David clutched his chest, breathing heavy. "Jerry, you may have been doing this a long time and used to pulling stunts like that. If you want to play with your life, that's fine. But you're also playing with mine." "What? It's their fault? The SUV or the truck should have pulled over or slowed down. There's no shoulder." Their argument was lost in a high-pitched sound. A glint flashed across the rearview mirror. It happened again. The noise and flashes increased, as if gaining on them. The unassuming SUV had donned lights and sirens. The flashing red lights from inside the cab looked angry, and the flashing headlights played a game of gotcha. Jerry cursed and slowly pulled over. The window slid into the door, and Jerry glanced back at the highway patrolman. "License and registration, please." He handed both to the patrolman. "You don't have anything better to do?" The patrolman's head snapped up from examining the documents. "Sir, wait here while I check on something." He rolled the window up to guard from the Texas heat. "I can't believe this guy." "I can't believe you," mumbled David. Both sat quiet, letting the air conditioning keep them cool. Eventually, the patrolman returned. "Sir, you've had 2 moving violations in the last 18 months. I'm citing you for reckless driving and improper lane change." "What?" Jerry exclaimed. "I can't believe this crap." "Sir, according to my radar, you were doing more than 20 over the limit. You made a lane change with a solid yellow line and within a quarter-mile of a hill. You endangered my life and the life of that trucker. I ought to throw this ticket away, Jerry said, while shaking it in the patrolman's face. I'd then have to cite you for littering. Drive safely, sir. Jerry rolled the window back up while putting the ticket in his visor pocket. With the window cracked, he had to get in the last word. Asshole. He stewed at the patrolman while driving away. As the sun set behind him, it seemed to cool his temper. Until they reached Fort Worth. Jerry stayed in the passing lane, honking at anyone traveling too slow and making abrupt lane changes. Almost to the office, he sailed through 2 red lights. He stopped when a car in front of him stopped for the traffic signal. As soon as the light turned green, Jerry honked. Move it, dipshit. It's green. Reaching the office, he took the documents inside and turned them into his boss. He showed David the proper techniques for checking the documents in and checking out for the day. So that's the life of a courier. What do you think? David stepped close and stared at Jerry angrily. I may be new here, but you were downright reckless and unprofessional today. I'm willing to keep this between you and me today. But if I ever hear of you acting like this again, or see it, I'll go straight to the offices about it. Jerry laughed when David turned and walked away. What does he know? I'm a good driver. I'm a professional. It was their fault. Pushing the accelerator hard, Jerry passed the slow driver. Jerk, he said while honking. Still angry about David's tirade from yesterday, Jerry tried to imagine how he could have handled the situation better. I should have told him I've been driving courier for 10 years, and he should keep his mouth shut, or I'll shut it for him. Or I could have told him to go to hell. Maybe I should have. His mind snapped to attention when seeing another slow-moving driver. Glancing at his speedometer, Jerry noticed he traveled nearly 90. What is today? Everyone drives slow today? Asshole, he yelled while passing the car. Hearing a horn, he saw the car in the oncoming lane. Accelerating, he zipped back into his lane with a few seconds to spare. A yawn deflated Jerry's ire. The sun started to drop in the western sky, taking away the gale force winds. For a split second, the beautiful orange glare took away his temper. The highway seemed lonelier today. He actually missed David in the car. Occasionally, he did train a new driver, which was something he enjoyed. His stomach moaned. Jerry sped faster, wanting to get to a restaurant in the next town, then drop off the last bit of pharmaceuticals, then head home. The car seemed relieved as well when the engine stopped. Stretching his back and arms, Jerry tried to awaken his stiff, atrophied muscles. Popping his joints, he looked forward to a nice meal. Sitting at his oirate booth, He did not even glance at the menu. The familiar waitress appeared. Somewhere between fit and heavy, she had aged gray eyes that had plenty of wisdom, but mostly from hearing stories. Her wrinkles disappeared in a smile, giving off a pleasant light. It was the typical small-town cafe waitress who had the friendly ear and subtle wisdom. "Hi, Jerry." "The usual?" "Hey, Diane." "Yeah, the usual." "How's the job?" "Boring as ever. Picking up piss, drugs, and lab tests. At least all the idiot drivers make it interesting." She smiled while filling out the ticket. "It'll be out soon, hun." Jerry sighed, dreading the 2-hour drive back to Fort Worth. Damn dipshit drivers. Not all idiots. Jerry looked at the old man who sat in the booth next to him. Was he there before? They all can't be idiots. Grandpa said, if you meet one idiot a day, you met an idiot. If everyone you meet is an idiot, you may be the idiot. He was right, you know. Anger's no good. It leads to prisons and a terrible lot in life. The darkness almost hid the distinguished wrinkles and tired eyes. A red, faded ball cap had Stan's trucking stenciled on it. I used to be on the giving end of anger. Now I receive it. Constantly. Perplexed, Jerry wondered why a man whose voice had so much wisdom also dripped with sadness. "It's a lonely life," the man said, "but it's my lot. I'll take it, though I hate it." Jerry hunched his shoulders. "Hate what?" "Ever since..." The man shook his head, unable to finish his sentence. Jerry stood and glanced outside, noticing the large, black truck. "That yours?" asked Jerry. The old man nodded lightly. "Yep, been driving it for years. I hope someday someone can take my place." Jerry stood, wanting to get away from the bizarre old man. He rushed to the bathroom, washed his hands, then returned for dinner. "Good," Jerry mumbled, glad the old man had left. Glancing out the window, the truck was also gone. The waitress finally returned with dinner. "So, Diane, what's with the old coot who was in that booth?" Debbie narrowed her eyelids. "Old man? The one in that booth there," Jerry said, pointing at it. Debbie put her hands on her hips. "I haven't sat anyone in that booth tonight." Jerry looked towards the other booth, wondering if he perceived the sitting arrangement correctly. No. A woman and her child sat there, and he remembered them. He pointed outside. Remember, his cap said, "Stan's Trucking." "Wait a minute," she said disdainfully. "The old man with the Stan's Trucking ball cap?" Jerry nodded, finally taking a bite of his steak. Her voice changed, with a mixture of eeriness and joviality. "Ooh, honey, you've seen a ghost." "I don't believe in ghosts. Legend has it, a guy named Stan disappeared on this highway about 20 years ago. His truck had this route to Abilene, but truck and driver disappeared. No one ever found him or his truck." Jerry shook his head. "No way. The guy was here. Probably a new guy for Stan's Trucking. Well, if he was here, said Debbie, he stiffed a check and my tip. And I didn't have to bus the table. Jerry shook his head while finishing his meal. A large semi sped by, spreading the dry Texas dirt behind it, along with the carbon monoxide. Jerry coughed. Wiggling his keys, Jerry unlocked his small pickup and got in. The last delivery. Finally, he could go home. 2 more hours, then a weekend of rest and recreation awaited him. His wheels launched him onto the lonely, dark highway. Darkness spread in front of him, while the sun's light faded behind him. Jerry's eyelids felt heavy. Too much to eat, he thought. He slapped himself and turned on the radio, trying to wake himself. After singing a few bars, he yawned, preventing any distinguishable lyrics. Quickly, he switched it over to a talk radio station, hoping the host might stir some thought to stay awake. No. The eyelids tried to shut. He jerked his head up and opened his eyes wide. As soon as he finished, they tried to shut again. He snapped his head to attention, hoping to stave off sleep. The right side of his truck vibrated heavily, jarring him awake. Quickly, he pulled off the rumble strip and back into the lane. Shaking his head, he remembered a rest stop about 40 miles down the highway. He hoped to make it. His head dropped again. Jerry's eyes blurred. As his vision narrowed, his mind relaxed, anticipating blissful sleep. Almost there, unable to fight it, his eyes closed. A loud honking noise jolted Jerry awake. Cursing, he pulled his head up and cursed loudly. What the? Headlights closed in. Too bright and too close. They almost blinded him. Back off, jerk. Fully awake now, Jerry saw his speed near 85. The vehicle behind him closed the gap. Able to flip the rearview mirror, he sped up, trying to gain some distance. The truck continued to remain close, as if taunting him. I said, Jerry said, while tapping the brakes. Back off. The loud horn almost hurt his ears. It sounded 3 or 4 times. The truck closed the gap again. What the? Jerry said, while flipping off the driver. He hoped the driver of the vehicle could see him. The loud honking started again, jarring Jerry's eardrums. He wanted to cover his ears, but he feared taking both hands off the steering wheel with this maniac behind him. Seeing the small shoulder, Jerry pulled to the right. He ignored the annoying vibrations from the shoulder grooves. Okay, he said, while slowing down. Go ahead and get around me. The vehicle also pulled over, maintaining a close distance to Jerry's bumper. What the? He glanced ahead, seeing nothing in the oncoming lane. It's clear, you idiot. Get around me. The horn resounded again. bellowing louder, as if releasing anger or sheer malevolence. Suddenly, an empty feeling tried to drag his chest down. Sensing harm as the driver's intent scared him, an ominous dread filled his chest. Jerry moved to the empty oncoming lane, hoping the driver would pass him. The truck followed every move. In fact, now it seemed as if the vehicle moved to make sure and get its bright lights into the side rear-view mirrors. "Damn it," Jerry yelled. "What the hell is your problem?" He moved back to the correct lane, only to be followed again. Defenseless, Jerry felt nervous and outmatched. Whatever vehicle stalked him, he could tell it was at least 2 or 3 feet higher, like an SUV or oversized pickup. The driver pulled alongside Jerry and flashed its lights at him. It honked again, startling him. "You goddamned idiot," he yelled while rolling down his window. "You're gonna kill—" His voice trailed. The dread froze his mind as he recognized the large black truck from the diner. He barely caught the license plate. EVL 666. Jerry might laugh, but he panicked and hit his brakes hard as the truck swerved in front of him, flashed its brake lights for a second, then sped up. The black truck blended with the night. Brake lights revealed its presence again. Jerry veered to the right while hitting his brakes. This time, all tires left the pavement, and his small truck rolled across the plains. Tumbleweeds and tall grass slammed into his grill and thumped the hood. He crashed through a small wooden fence. Scared, he slowed more. A cow appeared in his lights. Veering hard to the right, Jerry barely missed it. Some trees appeared. Panicked, Jerry pushed the brake all the way to the floor. His truck jolted to a stop. Jerry's chest slapped the steering wheel, while papers, pens, and trash all snapped forward. Dust rolled into his cab, trying to choke his throat and invade his eyes. Even though the air conditioner poured cold air on his face, sweat beaded down his forehead and made his palms slick. He quivered, actually fearing for his life. Nearly 200 yards away, the black truck waited on the shoulder. Dust outlined its bright headlights. Jerry stared at the monster, forgetting his fear and forging hatred. Furious, he grabbed his steel flashlight. Clutching it tightly, he imagined pounding the driver's head until it turned into a bloody pulp. "You goddamn jerk," he said, while gaining anger with every step. "Get out of the truck!" The horn sounded, slightly startling him. "I said, get out of the truck," he said, while hitting the hood with his flashlight. The horn wailed again. "I said," Jerry said, reaching for the door. "Get out of—" The door opened. Fiery eyes leapt at Jerry. The mouth, lined with disfigured, randomly sharpened teeth, howled loudly. Cold, shadowy arms extended and tried to grab him. Jerry slammed the door and fell backwards. Panicked, he jumped up and rushed back to his truck. The shrill horn sounded again, leaving behind a cold, dreaded fright. In a full run, he got back to his car, slammed the door shut, and rolled up the window. You can't get away from him. Jerry shined the light at the old man. What the? Who are you? What's going on? The old man looked as if he was about to cry. I'm sorry, but he's letting me go, and he needs a new driver. Get the hell out! Jerry screamed while trying to push the old man out of the truck. More confused than scared, Jerry stopped trying to extract the man. What are you talking about? I thought you were... An invisible vice clamped on Jerry's neck. Feeling like cold steel, the touch robbed the warmth in his body. In his rear-view mirror, he saw it. The monster's disfigured face looked as if it had been burned. Its eyes alternated between a hollow, black color and a fiery red anger. Its large mouth stretched wide, emanating a deadly hiss. So long, young fellow, you'll learn, just as I did. Jerry tried to reach for the old man's help. Ignored, he struggled against the powerful, cold grip. It clamped tighter. Soon, everything blurred, then went dark. David stared at the long, forgotten highway while yawning. The road stretched endlessly, fading into a blur in the far distance. Soon, the sun started to recede behind him, trying to blind him in the mirrors. The empty miles obstructed his journey back to Fort Worth. David wondered what happened to Jerry. He was last seen at a cafe several miles back. Then he disappeared. The highway patrol could not find him, nor his truck. David snapped awake as he approached a black pickup truck. It traveled too slow. Needing to get around it, David moved to the left. Unable to see very well, David lightly tapped his horn. The truck moved to the right, then he zipped around it. Move it, dummy! Jerry stared into the distance as the small pickup got around him. Tired, he wanted to sleep. Depressed, he wanted to cry. Hungry, he longed for food. His passenger, though, enjoyed making him listen to everyone who passed him. Jerk! Idiot! You damn fool! Get the hell out of the way! Every insult echoed perfectly in Jerry's ears. Keep going. Suddenly, I looked up. Was I asleep? Had I forgotten my flight? Everyone around me seemed nervous, or so it seemed to me. I immediately reached for my robotic purse. It's always a good thing to carry on such a journey. Its fingerprint scanner still worked. I looked across the way at the panini shop, at which point there was a thunderous roar in my belly. Suddenly, the sound of a plane landing. Attention customers, flight boo, boo, boo to San Francisco, now boarding. Aha, I've caught you. I immediately grabbed at anything I could. Things that I was pretty sure were mine, or that would be nice to own in any case. As we all stumbled toward the flight gate with our boarding pass, it became obvious that we weren't all going to get the window seat in the cockpit. Someone was going to have to fly the plane. "You can handle this, young Hopite," I said to myself. "Remember your training, yon grasshopper." I walked up to the gate like a supermodel doing her taxes. It wasn't easy being this funky. The airport attendant shot me a glance as I approached, then looked back down at his screens. "My eyes are up here. Buddy, may I help you, miss?" "Yes. Well, I would like to get on the plane." "Which plane?" "That one. The one at the end of the gate. There is no other plane." "Miss, you have to be specific. It's my first day on the job." I looked at him with a deep sense of pity, not wanting to shake anything up. He had the look of an Ohio school teacher who had gotten lost after an all-night kegger. I gingerly handed him my ticket. "Are you sure you're in the right airport?" "The right airport? Yes, yes, yes." "You're sure? Or yes, you're agreeing with me?" "Yes, I'm sure that I am agreeing with you." "Yes, this is the right airport. I'm sure of it. I majored in airports in college." "Okay, take your boarding pass over here and get on that plane over there if you need further instruction." Okay, I'm good. Let's go." I subsequently made it to the boarding window. "Miss Bakersfield," said the boarding attendant with the gigantic glasses. "Yes? You've been bumped up to first class. Jesus, couldn't have thought of a better ending than that." I kissed my ticket and pressed it to the sky. My bags and body armor hanging off me like the tattered rags of a battered Superman. "Where is first class? In the back?" I asked in pure euphoria. "On the plane." I got on the plane. And what did I see? First class was amazing. The people here were so jelly of my success that I could barely contain myself. I sat next to a young, old gentleman reading a financial newspaper. Soon enough, we went down the runway, and then we all collectively hopped into the air at once, hurling the 100-ton behemoth into space. As soon as we struck the atmosphere, I got chatty and looked to my left, only to find that the newspaper cemented to my compatriot's face had now been surgically removed. "Hello?" I said. "I'm Miss Bakersfield." "So they say." "So who says? I've got no time for questions. I'm a very busy man." "Busy doing what?" "Busy reading newspapers. You know that every time a newspaper is printed, a priest starves to death in Bangladesh? Is that in the Guinness Book? It should be." "Where are you going?" "Who said I need to be going anywhere? You're the one who's going away. Forgive my impetuosity. We are both hurtling through space at the speed of light. I figured you would be going somewhere. It's all in the mind." "Yes, sir. I agree. It truly is in the mind." "Do you buy timeshares?" "Sorry, I don't. I was asking because I wanted to buy one for myself." "Really? That's interesting." "Yes. I made my first $1,000 selling timeshares in Old Italy. And then Jesus was crucified." He let out an uproarious laugh that could not be mistaken for sarcasm, traveling at this speed. "So," I said, not having understood my place in the scheme of life. "Nurse," he said. "I'm not a nurse," said the flight attendant, as she walked by. "What can I get for you? Could you bring me my hunting knife?" "Yes, right away." "Hunting knife?" I said. "Yes," he said. "I like to flick my knife when I get nervous." The flight attendant went toward the cockpit and then knocked on the door, using a secret knock that only people with knives understood. Suddenly, the door opened, and there stood the co-pilot. He spoke with her a while, and then handed her what looked, from a distance, to be a small child wrapped in leather. As she dragged it back to where we were, I almost expected it to start singing its ABCs, until she walked over to me, lugged it over my lap, and handed it to the man who never went anywhere. He sat there with the small, sharp, metallic toddler in his hand, flicking the edge of the blade. Each flicking was a bullet to my eardrum, but I didn't say anything. I just looked at him. Thank God my purse was robotic. Or was it really? The man who never went anywhere flicked his blade a few more times. "Have you ever bought a hotel?" "I'm allergic." "I didn't say that. I said, did you ever buy a hotel?" "Well, I am in first class." Now that's a classy response. I like you. You seem to be so comfortable. Well, first class does that to a lady. We flew for hours. The man who went nowhere continually flicked his blade while I tried to figure out the lock on my robotic purse. As we flew, the sunlight of 1,000 dances went through the cockpit. We were free.